"My dad said you need a wife," she whispered. I replied, "Then stay here with me." Elias Ward stood there, hands resting on the cold metal railing of his small station apartment. He had lived here for almost 2 years, a human among strangers, quietly repairing and maintaining the old systems that kept the orbital trade station alive. Earth had retreated from interstellar politics decades ago, leaving humanity in a quiet corner of the galaxy, unnoticed and underestimated. But here, on the station orbiting the mining planet Urandor, humans still mattered, if only because they worked. The soft hum of the station's engines and the occasional flicker of the lights reminded Elias that life, no matter how isolated, went on. He turned slightly as the door hissed open. "Elias." The voice was soft, hesitant, almost musical. "Lyra." She was taller than most humans, with skin that shimmered faintly under the station lights, reflecting colors that humans didn't even have names for. Her eyes were wide, curious, and cautious, and her presence always made Elias feel more alert than usual. "I didn't hear you come in," Elias said, turning fully to face her. His voice was steady, casual, but his heart thumped a little faster than normal. "I try not to disturb you," she said, stepping closer, her hands folded lightly in front of her. "But sometimes, I wonder if I disturb myself more by leaving." Elias raised an eyebrow, used to her peculiar way of speaking. Lyra wasn't human, and the differences between their species often made communication tricky. Yet somehow, in the last few months, they had found a rhythm. A quiet companionship, built on shared meals, conversations about strange alien customs, and the human habit of stubbornness. "Why don't you stay, then?" Elias asked, almost absent-mindedly, though part of him hoped she would. Lyra's eyes flickered. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My father, he said you need a wife." The words hung in the air, almost impossible to understand. Humans were not known for arranging marriages across species, especially with aliens who had rules far older than Earth itself. Yet somehow, Elias felt no shock, only curiosity, mixed with a strange warmth he didn't expect. He smiled faintly. "Then stay here with me," he replied. For a moment, silence filled the room. The stars outside seemed brighter, almost as if they were listening. Lyra blinked, her expression a mixture of disbelief and hope. Elias felt a rare surge of confidence, the kind that only humans seem to carry when they refuse to back down in impossible situations. The day had started like any other, with the station's alarms signaling minor maintenance issues and the usual traders haggling over shipping schedules. Elias had fixed electrical panels, recalibrated sensors, and even patched a tiny leak in the life support system. Life in space demanded attention to detail. One wrong calculation could lead to disaster. And humans, Elias had learned, were quietly very good at avoiding disaster. Lyra had arrived mid-morning, claiming she needed to study human behavior for her cultural research. The station's administration tolerated her presence because the compact allowed species to observe one another. Most aliens found humans boring, unpredictable in ways they didn't understand. But Elias, a man who had spent years repairing engines with nothing but his own 2 hands and an old toolkit, found humans fascinating in their stubbornness, their loyalty, and their unexpected courage. "Are you really going to stay?" she asked again, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the fear she tried so hard to hide. Elias shrugged. "I don't see why not. This is my home, and I don't usually take orders from anyone, especially not from fathers, galactic empires, or alien alliances." She laughed softly, a sound like wind passing through crystal towers. "You humans, you are impossible." "Impossibly stubborn," Elias corrected with a grin. "It's our best quality." The station's corridors were quiet when they walked together toward the observation deck. Lyra moved with careful grace, her limbs fluid and almost weightless compared to humans. She stopped at the railing, staring out at the rings of Urandor below. The planet's surface was a rusty red, streaked with veins of silver minerals. Mining ships moved across the atmosphere like insects, tiny specks against the vast planet. "You really understand the rules," she said finally, not looking at him. "You know I can't just stay here without consequences. My father, he will not forgive this." Elias leaned beside her. "Rules exist to guide people, not to trap them. You want to stay, then find a way to stay. That's how humans work. We don't give up just because someone older or stronger wants to force us." She turned toward him, eyes wide. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," he admitted. "It's necessary, and sometimes necessary is more important than simple." Lyra considered his words for a moment. Then she placed her hand lightly on the railing next to his. Her touch was warm, almost electric to a human. Elias didn't flinch. He had spent enough time repairing circuits and engines that sparks no longer startled him. But somehow this was different. "You are unlike any human I've studied," she said softly. "And you're unlike anyone I've ever met," he replied. Hours passed. The two of them talked quietly about small things: stars, ship designs, human superstitions, alien philosophies. The station's normal hum became a comforting backdrop, almost like a lullaby. For Lyra, the idea of leaving became more distant with each passing moment. She wanted to run, to obey the compact, to return to her father's expectations. But she also wanted something new, something unknown, something that, for the first time in her life, felt like her choice. Elias didn't push. He simply existed in the same space, steady, reliable and human in a way that made her feel safe. His presence was a paradox, quiet yet strong, ordinary yet capable of defying the galaxy's expectations. She had spent her life following rules, navigating ancient laws, and pleasing her family. And here, on a small station floating above a red planet, she realized she might be able to break all of them. "Do you think humans always have to fight to stay?" she asked. Elias thought for a moment. "Not always. Sometimes we fight with words, with loyalty, with ingenuity. But yes, sometimes if something is worth it, we fight with everything we have. That's how humans survive." She studied him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. Elias Ward was not a soldier, he was not a warrior, but in his calm determination, in his quiet defiance, he was something stronger than most armies she had seen. Maybe I can stay," she whispered. Elias turned toward her, a small, knowing smile on his face. "Maybe you already have." As night fell over Erendor, the observation deck was bathed in starlight. Trading ships continued their slow dance above the planet, oblivious to the small rebellion taking place on the station. Humanity, quiet and unassuming, had already begun to make its mark, not with weapons or domination, but with principles, loyalty, and the courage to choose one's own path. For Lyra, the realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Choosing to stay with a human might mean defying centuries of law, her father's wrath, and the expectations of her entire species. But for the first time, she felt truly free. And for Elias, it was just another day. Another chance to prove, in his quiet, human way, that sometimes the simplest choices, like offering someone to stay, could change the galaxy. The stars stretched on forever. And between them, two very different beings, human and alien, had found a shared defiance that might just be strong enough to last a lifetime. The day after Lyra decided to stay with Elias began quietly, almost deceptively normal. The station hummed with its usual rhythm, traders haggling over cargo, engineers running diagnostic scans, and maintenance drones gliding through corridors with smooth, mechanical precision. But beneath the ordinary hum, a tension simmered, invisible yet undeniable. Lyra sat at the observation deck again, her legs swinging slightly as she stared out at the distant mining planet. Elias had left her for a short while to check on a malfunction in the station's power grid. She watched the red dust storm sweeping across Erendor's surface and wondered if her decision would ever be enough. Her father, a powerful leader of her people, would never forgive this. The thought weighed heavily on her, but it also filled her with a strange thrill. Humans, stubborn, defiant, and unpredictable, had a way of making choices feel like revolutions. Elias returned, wiping his hands on a rag, looking exactly the same as usual, calm, steady, confident. "You're thinking too much," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "I am thinking," she replied, her voice small, "about consequences, about my father, about the compact, about everything." He smiled faintly. "You're humanizing the problem, that's your mistake." "I'm not human," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but humans aren't the only ones who make choices. And humans, sometimes, we make them anyway, even when it's dangerous." By midday, the station's comm network crackled to life. A holographic image flickered into existence above the command console. It was Lyra's father, tall, imposing, and radiating authority. His presence filled the room even though he was thousands of kilometers away. "Daughter," he said, his voice cold but controlled, "you have made a choice that violates our agreements. Explain yourself." Lyra flinched, her gaze dropping to the floor. I want to stay here with Elias. It is my choice." The hologram's eyes narrowed and the ambient light in the room seemed colder. "Your choice is irrelevant. You were to return immediately. You were to comply. The compact rules are clear." Elias stepped forward, hands raised slightly in a gesture of calm. "Your daughter is not a possession. She is a person. And humans have something you seem to misunderstand. We don't take orders we don't respect." The holographic figure blinked as if Elias' words were an unexpected jolt. "You dare." "I dare because it's true," Elias said. "If you try to force her, the station will refuse. Systems will shut down. Trade routes will collapse. The compact depends on humans quietly holding things together. You know it." The father's hologram paused. Silence filled the room. Lyra looked at Elias in awe. No one else had ever stood up to her father this way. And yet he did it not with threats or weapons, but with something far more powerful, human confidence and reason. Later, in the quiet of the maintenance bay, Elias explained, "Listen, Lyra. You think humans are small in the galaxy, unnoticed, unimportant, but we're not. We survive where others fail. We find ways to solve problems when the rules don't fit, and we protect the people we care about no matter what anyone else says." Lyra nodded slowly. "It's different from my people. We follow the rules, always, even when they hurt us." "That's your choice," Elias said softly. "But humans, we fight when we have to, not because we want to, but because we must. And sometimes the fight is quiet, invisible, but it works." She considered his words. The station's metal walls, the humming engines, the soft glow of the observation deck, all felt like a small rebellion, a place where the impossible could exist. Meanwhile, the compact began noticing irregularities. Communication delays, trade inconsistencies, and minor technical failures caused by deliberate human interference were spreading through the station's networks. The humans, underestimated and ignored for so long, were quietly reshaping the situation. An alien delegation arrived unexpectedly, intending to remove Lyra forcibly. Their ships hung in the atmosphere, sleek and threatening, their lights cutting through the planet's dusty clouds. They believed humans would surrender, as the galaxy had always assumed. But Elias had anticipated this. He activated emergency protocols, rerouted power, and secured key systems. For the aliens, it was frustrating. Every attempt to take Lyra was blocked, not by weapons, but by human ingenuity. Doors locked, transporters failed, and communications jammed, not destructively, but precisely enough to delay the extraction. From their perspective, humans were stubborn, chaotic, and unpredictable. But Elias smiled quietly to himself. Humans had a way of making rules work for them, bending systems without breaking them. Lyra watched, astonished, as the humans quietly defied the galaxy's assumptions. "You don't even use weapons," she whispered. No need, Elias said. Humans are more effective when we don't follow expectations. Strength isn't always in firepower. That evening, as the alien delegation finally withdrew, thwarted, frustrated, and confused, Lyra and Elias stood on the observation deck again. The stars seemed to glow brighter as if the universe acknowledged the small rebellion. "You're different," Lyra said. "Your people, they're quiet, but they're strong." "Strength isn't always loud," Elias said. "Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's cleverness. Sometimes it's loyalty." She looked at him, seeing more than a human engineer. She saw a being capable of challenging entire systems, of standing firm against authority, and of protecting what mattered most. "Do you think I made the right choice?" she asked. "You didn't make a choice for me," he said, smiling faintly. "You made it for yourself, that's what counts." For the first time in her life, Lyra realized the weight of freedom. Her choice was dangerous, yes, but it was hers. And humans, she began to understand, would defend it in ways no one else could. The next days passed with quiet determination. Elias and Lyra worked together to repair minor systems, organize supplies, and prepare for potential inspections. But the station's atmosphere had shifted. Humans were no longer seen as minor players. They were unpredictable, capable, and resolute. Other species began whispering about the human who refused to leave, the one who had challenged a powerful alien authority without lifting a weapon. Lyra noticed the change. She felt pride swelling inside her. Not because Elias was a hero, but because humans made heroism ordinary. They solved impossible problems with ingenuity, courage, and dedication. "You know," she said one night, "your people, they really are remarkable." Elias chuckled. "We just try to survive." And sometimes, survival looks like courage to others. She smiled softly, leaning against him. For the first time, she felt truly safe. Not because the galaxy had rules to protect her, but because a human was willing to bend those rules to keep her close. The day ended quietly. Stars glittered outside the viewport. Trading ships continued their slow dance above Urindor. For Lyra, the galaxy seemed bigger, more complex, and more alive than ever before. For Elias, it was just another day of proving that humans could accomplish the impossible in subtle, remarkable ways. The cost of choosing a human, she realized, was immense, but the reward might just be worth every challenge. And so, the quiet rebellion continued. Humanity, underestimated for centuries, had shown once again that the universe could not predict their choices, their courage, or their loyalty. And Lyra, for the first time, understood why the galaxy often underestimated humans, and why that was their greatest strength. The orbital station floated silently above Urindor, bathed in the cold light of distant stars. To an untrained observer, everything seemed normal: traders moving cargo, engineers checking instruments, and humans quietly going about their work. But beneath the calm, a storm of politics, diplomacy, and quiet rebellion was brewing. Elias moved through the station with the confidence of someone who understood both its machinery and its people. Every panel he touched, every wire he adjusted, was part of a larger plan. He was not preparing for battle in the conventional sense. Humans were not warriors like some of the species in the compact. Instead, Elias fought with intelligence, patience, and ingenuity, the tools humans had mastered over millennia. Lyra followed him closely, observing how he worked. "You really think this can stop them?" she asked softly. Elias didn't look up from the control panel. "It's not about stopping them. It's about making them see that forcing you isn't worth it. They can't take you without consequences, and we're making sure of that." Her eyes widened as she realized the depth of his plan. Humans didn't charge blindly into conflict. They prepared, calculated, and used their environment to their advantage. Lyra had never met a species that could fight without striking a single blow, yet still command respect and fear across the galaxy. The next morning, the station received an urgent transmission. A representative from the compact had arrived, sent to assess the situation and ensure that no human interference disrupted interstellar protocols. Lyra's father's voice echoed through the communication system, sharp and commanding. "You are defying centuries of law," he said. "And the compact will not tolerate this. Return immediately." Elia stepped forward calmly. "Your laws are impressive, but they only work if people follow them voluntarily. We're humans. We make our own choices." Lyra chose to stay. "You can enforce your rules, but you can't enforce her will, and that difference matters." There was a long pause. Silence stretched across the station. Lyra held her breath, her heart pounding. She had never imagined someone speaking to her father like this. And yet here was Elias doing exactly that, with respect, clarity, and unshakable confidence. Finally, the hologram of her father flickered and faded. He had not received the defiance he expected. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, Elia's quiet strategy had already begun to shift perceptions. The following days were tense. Trade shipments were delayed, some alliances were strained, and whispers spread across the compact's communication networks. Human influence, often overlooked, was suddenly undeniable. Traders, engineers, and even other alien species noticed the subtle ways humans could disrupt expectations without creating chaos. Lyra watched Elia's coordinate systems, reroute power, and communicate with other humans across the station. Each decision was calculated, precise, and nonviolent, yet the effect was profound. Ships couldn't leave without clearance, extraction teams found systems inaccessible, and schedules collapsed, all without humans ever pointing a weapon. "Humans are unpredictable," an alien engineer whispered to a colleague. "They don't fight in the ways we expect. And somehow they always win." Lyra felt a mix of pride and awe. This was the species she had underestimated. They weren't the strongest physically. They weren't the most advanced technologically. But they were clever, patient, and loyal. And in that combination, they were unstoppable. One night, as the station's lights dimmed for the cycle of rest, Elias and Lyra walked the observation deck. The planet below glimmered with mining lights and the stars stretched endlessly. For a moment, neither spoke. "You're amazing," Lyra said finally. "Not just for me, but for everyone. You humans, you change things without anyone noticing until it's too late." Elias shrugged modestly. "We do what we have to. Survival isn't about glory. It's about making sure the people you care about are safe, and the systems you rely on keep working." Lyra studied him, realizing that humanity's strength was subtle but absolute. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They did not rely on weapons, fear, or intimidation. They survived and sometimes thrived because they could adapt, outthink, and endure. "I don't know how to thank you," she admitted. "You don't need to," Elias said. "Just stay, that's enough." And for the first time, she understood. Humans didn't need to be the loudest, fastest, or strongest to make a difference. Their quiet defiance could move entire civilizations. The tension escalated when a compact inspection team arrived unexpectedly. They demanded access to every system, every communication log, and every facility on the station. Elias met them with calm precision. "Everything is functioning normally," he said, "but some areas are restricted for safety reasons. You can review the logs you need, but any further interference could compromise station operations." The inspectors were frustrated. They expected resistance or submission. What they got was clear, logical reasoning. Human ingenuity made the station both compliant and impossible to fully control. Meanwhile, Lyra observed how Elias communicated with other humans across the network. His instructions were precise, his calm confidence infectious. Humans worked together in ways other species couldn't comprehend. They didn't need hierarchy or fear. They relied on cooperation, trust, and clever problem-solving. One inspector muttered to another, "How do they do this? One human is enough to hold an entire station against us." And that was the truth. Elia's ward, one human among many, had created a web of subtle resistance that even the Compact's most powerful enforcers couldn't dismantle. By the fifth day, the galaxy began noticing. Traders spoke in hushed tones about the human engineer who refused to comply. Other alien species started reevaluating their assumptions about humanity. Lyra's father, observing from afar, realized that his daughter's decision to stay with a human was not an isolated act. It was part of a larger, quiet human strength that the galaxy had consistently underestimated. Lyra, too, began to see the consequences of her choice. Choosing to remain with Elias meant risking disapproval, political fallout, and even potential retaliation. But it also meant freedom, loyalty, and the rare chance to see a species at its purest form, human ingenuity in action. "You know," she said one evening, "I think your species might actually change the galaxy." Elias looked at her, expression calm but his eyes sharp. "We don't try to, we just exist. But when people notice, it's usually because we've already made a difference." She smiled, realizing that this quiet, persistent defiance was more powerful than any weapon. The humans were underestimated at every turn, yet somehow, they had the ability to shape outcomes that seemed impossible. A week passed, and the Compact finally withdrew most of its inspectors, unsure how to proceed. They could not remove Lyra, not without risking chaos in trade and operations. And humans, the galaxy's quiet problem solvers, had won without firing a single shot. Lyra turned to Elias, awe in her eyes. You didn't fight them, not really." "No," he said. "Humans fight differently. We plan, we protect, we survive. Sometimes the quietest actions are the most powerful." For Lyra, the lesson was clear. Humans were extraordinary not because they sought glory, but because they acted with courage, patience, and ingenuity. And in doing so, they had shown her a new kind of strength, a strength that did not demand war, only determination. The stars shone brighter that night. Trading ships moved silently, unaware of the subtle human victory taking place in their midst. Lyra realized that she was witnessing something remarkable. Humanity, underestimated for centuries, had quietly proven that courage and intelligence could overcome even the most rigid of rules. And Elias Ward, ordinary human engineer, had become the symbol of that quiet defiance. He did not lead armies. He did not issue ultimatums. He simply chose to protect what mattered, and in doing so, he reshaped perceptions across the galaxy. For Lyra, the choice to stay had become easier. The cost was high, but the reward, seeing humanity's quiet strength in action, was beyond measure. And somewhere deep in the station's hum, Elias smiled to himself, knowing that sometimes the smallest decisions, the choice to stand firm, to protect, to endure, could change everything. The galaxy might never understand humans fully, but that was exactly why they were so unstoppable. The orbital station had become more than a place of work. It had become a fortress, not built from walls or weapons, but from human ingenuity, patience, and quiet determination. Elias Ward moved through the corridors with calm confidence. Every panel he adjusted, every instruction he gave, made the station an environment that the galaxy's authorities could not control. Lyra followed him closely, still learning the rhythms of human defiance. She watched him interact with engineers and traders alike, realizing that humans did not inspire fear. They inspired loyalty, trust, and a sense of inevitability. When humans decided to hold a position, they did so with a quiet strength that could not be intimidated. "This is incredible," Lyra said one morning as they oversaw maintenance on the power core. "You're not even using weapons, and yet no one can force you to give me up." Elias smiled faintly. "Weapons are easy. Anyone can use them. But humans, our real strength, comes from thinking, from planning, and from refusing to be broken. If they can't break our systems, they can't break us. And if they can't break us, they can't break the people we care about." Lyra nodded slowly. She had never imagined courage could look like this, quiet, careful, and yet unyielding. The compact had been observing from afar, sending reports and inspectors, all frustrated by the human engineer who refused to comply. They could not understand how a single human, with no army, no fleet, could hold an entire station in defiance. A high-ranking envoy arrived unexpectedly, intending to finalize Lyra's extraction. Her father's hologram accompanied him, their combined presence meant to intimidate. "You underestimate us," Elias said calmly, stepping forward to meet them. "Lyra has the right to choose, and the station will not allow anyone to force her." The envoy's eyes narrowed. "Do you realize who you are speaking to?" Elias shrugged. "Yes. And I also know that the compact relies on humans to keep stations like this operational. If you attempt to take her, you risk shutting down trade routes, life support, and communication networks across multiple systems. And that is not a risk you can afford." The envoy hesitated. They had assumed humans would submit or flee, but here was proof that humans could resist without weapons, without violence, and without chaos, simply through determination and clever strategy. Lyra watched Elias, her respect and awe growing. Her father's expectations had been clear: obey, return, and comply. Yet here was a human who had changed everything with nothing more than quiet defiance. Over the next few days, Elias orchestrated a subtle but highly effective strategy. He rerouted communication lines, secured essential station systems, and coordinated with human engineers across the galaxy to create redundancies. Every attempt by outside forces to control Lyra or the station was delayed, blocked, or rerouted. The compact began to whisper among themselves. Traders, merchants, and other species spread rumors of the human engineer who could hold an entire station against alien authority. The galaxy had always underestimated humans, assuming they were weak, disorganized, and irrelevant. Now they were learning that human resilience and intelligence were unmatched. Lyra's father finally appeared in person, arriving at the station via shuttle. He stepped into the main hall, his presence commanding and powerful. "Elias Ward," he said, his voice steady but tinged with surprise. "You have held my daughter against the compact's will." "Why?" Elias did not flinch. "Because humans do not force others to follow rules that they do not understand or agree with. Lyra is not property. She is a person, and when humans see someone being threatened, we protect them. That is our nature." Her father studied him, noting the calm confidence in his eyes, the quiet authority in his posture, and the unwavering tone of his voice. It was different from any defiance he had encountered. "And you are certain this will not backfire?" Elias smiled. "Backfire, perhaps, but humans survive, we adapt, and we do not break." The weeks that followed were tense. The compact attempted negotiations, inspections, and even minor coercion tactics. Each attempt failed, not because of brute force, but because Elias had thought through every possible scenario. Systems failed only where needed, communications rerouted subtly, and human engineers coordinated quietly to maintain the station's operations while denying access to outsiders. Lyra realized that this was the human way: patience, careful planning, and unyielding determination. They did not need grand gestures or battles to win. They simply endured, adapted, and persisted until the outcome favored them. "You are extraordinary," she whispered one evening as they watched the stars from the observation deck. Elias shook his head. "No. Ordinary humans can do this. Most just don't try. But when it matters, when someone's life is on the line, we show what humans are really capable of." She nodded, understanding finally. Courage was not always loud. Strength was not always measured by force. Humanity's power was quiet, patient, and enduring, and utterly unstoppable when applied with purpose. Her father observed from afar, growing frustrated yet begrudgingly impressed. He realized that attempting to remove Lyra by force would not succeed. Instead, he began to reassess the assumptions he had about humans. They were not weak, they were not simple, and most importantly, they refused to break. The compact's enforcement teams withdrew, unsure how to proceed. They could not remove Lyra without causing massive disruption across trade routes, communications, and station operations. And humans, through nothing more than clever strategy, had won once again. Lyra looked at Elias, her eyes wide. You didn't fight them with weapons, and yet you've already won. Elias shrugged. Humans fight differently. Sometimes the quietest actions are the most powerful. We survive, we adapt, we protect. That is how we win. For Lyra, the lesson was clear. Choosing to stay with a human meant risk, yes, but also the rare opportunity to see true courage in action. Humans did not dominate through fear or violence. They succeeded through determination, intelligence, and loyalty. The final day of the compact's involvement arrived. Representatives approached Elias and Lyra for a final negotiation, expecting defiance or compromise. What they found instead was human consistency. Elias spoke with calm authority, explaining that Lyra's choice was hers alone and that the station would continue to operate safely under human control. Lyra's father, witnessing Elias' quiet strength firsthand, finally spoke. Perhaps humans are different than I believed. Elias smiled faintly. We are, but we are also predictable in one way. We protect those we care about. Lyra felt a wave of relief and admiration. The galaxy's authorities had underestimated humans for centuries, yet here they were, quietly reshaping outcomes without raising weapons, without issuing threats, simply through ingenuity, patience, and moral courage. The compact withdrew, leaving the station under human control. Trading routes resumed, engineers returned to their tasks, and life on the station slowly normalized. Yet the galaxy had already begun to notice the change. Humans could no longer be dismissed. They were unpredictable, unstoppable, and quietly powerful. That night, Lyra and Elias returned to the observation deck. The stars shimmered above and the planet below glowed softly. She turned to him, gratitude and awe shining in her eyes. You changed everything. Elias shook his head. No, humans just survive. And sometimes when it matters, we refuse to break. That's all it takes. For Lyra, the choice to stay had become simple. The cost had been high, but the reward, freedom, safety, and the opportunity to witness humanity's quiet defiance was worth every challenge. The station hummed softly around them, a testament to human ingenuity. The galaxy may never fully understand humans, but that was exactly what made them so unstoppable. And as they watched the stars stretch endlessly into space, Lyra understood that the universe had changed, not because humans fought loudly, but because they refused to break. The stars stretched endlessly above the station, glittering like scattered diamonds against the black void of space. The orbital station had returned to its quiet rhythm. Traders moved cargo, engineers repaired systems, and the hum of machinery filled every corridor. But nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy had learned something new about humans. They could not be broken, they could not be ignored, and they could change the rules quietly but decisively. Elias Ward stood in the observation deck, his hands resting lightly on the railing. The red planet Urindor glowed below, casting a faint light across the room. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes reflecting both awe and relief. For the first time in weeks, the weight of uncertainty lifted from her shoulders. You really did it, she whispered. All of it. You protected me, the station, everyone. Elias shook his head, a faint smile on his face. Humans just do what needs to be done. Sometimes it's cleverness, sometimes it's patience, and sometimes it's just refusing to break. She turned to him, eyes wide. You've changed everything. My father, the compact, even the galaxy, all without firing a weapon. Elias chuckled softly. We're not about weapons. Humans win because we endure, because we think, because we care. For Lyra, it was a revelation. The humans she had once underestimated were capable of quiet heroism, subtle strategy, and unwavering loyalty. They did not need armies or fleets to shape outcomes. They only needed determination and the courage to act when it mattered most. The compact had finally accepted the reality. Lyra's father had arrived once more, this time in person, not as a commander but as a cautious observer. He had expected defiance, confrontation, or rebellion. Instead, he found calm confidence, rational reasoning, and unwavering integrity. "You have proven something remarkable," he said to Elias. "Humans are not what I believed. You protect, endure, and change outcomes in ways we never imagined. And you did it for my daughter." Elias inclined his head. "She chose to stay. I only helped her remain safe while making her own decisions. That is what humans do. We honor choice, loyalty, and trust." Her father studied him carefully, recognizing the quiet strength in his words. For the first time, he understood that humans did not dominate with fear or authority. They influenced through steadfastness, ingenuity, and moral courage. And he realized, grudgingly but undeniably, that his daughter's choice to stay was protected by a force far stronger than mere orders: human loyalty and intellect. The station returned to its normal operations, but a ripple of change spread throughout the compact. Other species began reconsidering their assumptions about humanity. Traders spoke of the engineer who held a station against an entire political organization without firing a shot. Diplomats whispered about humans' unique ability to solve problems quietly and effectively. Lyra watched these changes with a mixture of pride and amazement. "You realize," she said one evening as they walked through the observation deck, "humans are not just survivors. You change everything you touch quietly but permanently." Elias smiled. "We just survive. But when survival matters to someone else, when it matters to the people we care about, we show strength in ways others often don't expect." She nodded, realizing the truth of it. The galaxy's greatest misconception about humans was not their weakness, but their subtle strength, their persistence, and their ability to endure against impossible odds. Weeks passed. The compact had formally withdrawn from the station. Lyra's father, though cautious, had come to respect Elia's ward, not just as a human, but as a protector, a strategist, and a symbol of everything humans could achieve quietly and effectively. The station was now fully operational under human guidance, with engineers and traders coordinating smoothly. Lyra had found her place alongside Elia's, not because anyone forced her, but because she chose to remain. Her choice was her own. For the first time, she felt complete freedom. "Do you ever think about the galaxy outside?" she asked. Elias glanced at the stars. "Every day. But humans don't conquer the galaxy with weapons. We conquer it by enduring, by creating, by protecting. And that is more powerful than fleets or armies." Lyra smiled. She had come to understand that human strength was invisible yet unbreakable. Their courage lay not in violence, but in intelligence, loyalty, and persistence, and she had witnessed it firsthand. One night, as they gazed at the planet below, Lyra turned to Elias with a small smile. "You know, when I whispered that line to you, about my father saying I needed a husband, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect humans could change the galaxy without even trying to fight." Elias chuckled softly. "You didn't think humans were that clever." "I thought humans were ordinary," she admitted. "I was wrong. You are extraordinary." He reached for her hand, warm and steady in his grasp. "Extraordinary? No. Ordinary humans can do this too. But when someone matters, when it's worth protecting, we refuse to break. That's what makes us remarkable. And Lyra," he paused, his gaze steady, "I'm glad you chose to stay, with me." Her heart swelled. The galaxy's expectations, the compact's rules, her father's authority, all of it faded in that quiet moment. Here, with a human who refused to be intimidated or controlled, she had found safety, freedom, and choice. "Then I will stay," she whispered, leaning close. "With you." And in that simple act, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The stars above shone brighter, as if celebrating the quiet victory of human courage, ingenuity, and loyalty. In the following weeks, life aboard the station settled into a peaceful rhythm. Humans quietly continued to maintain, repair, and improve the station's systems. Traders resumed their schedules, communication lines operated flawlessly, and alien visitors began to approach the station with a newfound respect for human determination. Lyra worked alongside Elias, learning not just engineering techniques but the principles of human resilience. She learned patience, careful planning, and the quiet power of refusing to break. Every day, she witnessed the galaxy's underestimation of humans, and every day she marveled at how humans turned subtlety into triumph. "You've changed more than the compact," she said one evening. "You've changed the way every species thinks about humans." "They will never underestimate us again." Elias shook his head. "They already did, and that's fine. Humans don't need approval. We just do what needs to be done. Protecting the people we care about, that's enough." Her eyes sparkled with admiration and understanding. Humans were not the strongest physically, nor the fastest technologically, but they were unpredictable, clever, and steadfast, qualities that made them nearly impossible to overcome. Eventually, Lyra's father returned one final time, not as an authority figure but as a man who had learned respect. He approached Elias in the main hall of the station. "You have proven something extraordinary," he said, "not only to me but to the galaxy. Your species, your loyalty, intelligence, and courage, I underestimated it." Elias inclined his head. "You don't need to praise humans. We just survive and we protect those who matter. That's all." Her father's eyes softened. "And yet that is enough. I see now why my daughter chose to stay, not because of threats or orders, but because she found someone who would stand firm and never break." Lyra watched silently, a quiet smile on her lips. The galaxy had changed in small but profound ways, all because humans refused to be broken. The final night on the observation deck felt different. The stars seemed endless, the red planet below glowing softly. Lyra turned to Elias. "Do you ever worry that humans might still be underestimated?" she asked. Elias smiled. "Perhaps, but that's okay. Humans don't need recognition to make a difference. We just endure, protect, and persist, and when the moment matters, we shine." She leaned against him, feeling warmth, safety, and belonging. "Then I am glad I stayed with you, with humans." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "And I am glad you did. Together, we are stronger than anything the galaxy can throw at us. Together, we endure. Together, we protect. And together, we never break." The stars stretched infinitely above them, a silent witness to the quiet triumph of humans. Across the galaxy, the legacy of Elias Ward and the human spirit began to ripple outward, not through conquest, not through fear, but through courage, loyalty, and intelligence. And in that moment, Lyra understood fully. The galaxy might never truly comprehend humans, but they would always respect the species that refused to break, that protected what mattered most, and that changed the course of history through quiet, enduring defiance. For Elias and Lyra, the choice was simple. They had faced the galaxy's expectations, defied them with cleverness and courage, and found freedom in one another. "Stay here with me," Elias said softly. "I will," Lyra replied. And together they watched the stars, knowing that humans had quietly reshaped their universe. One choice, one act of loyalty, and one refusal to break at a time.